right, so what I want to speak about this evening is cumulative frequency and the ogive. Okay, so the ogive is the graph of cumulative frequency, and both of these concepts are things that we first learned about in grade 11, and they get asked again in matric, just like we were doing on Tuesday with mean, standard deviation, etc., etc. We have to be able to answer questions on cumulative frequency and the ogive. These are things that are always, always, always going to be asked in paper 2. Okay, so again, it's something that's a little bit easier. This is a section where we would expect to get full marks. There's no reason why we shouldn't. These are not particularly difficult questions for us to answer. Okay, so let's have a look at the first example. So it says the company Health Mania conducted a survey in Gauteng to find out which age group most frequently uses their health supplements. The company determined the ages of a representative sample of their current client group. The ages of current clients were recorded and then sorted. The company wanted to market a new health supplement to the age group in Gauteng which most frequently uses their products. So this information was collected, right? So where it says class interval, the column on the very left-hand side, this is people's ages, right? So here, this is people's ages. Okay, so there was nobody between 0 and 10 years of age that used this health supplement. Then between the ages of 10 and 20, there were 11 people. Between the ages of 20 and 30, 14 people. 30 to 40, 17 people. 40 to 50, 13 people. 50 to 60, 7 people. 60 to 76 people. And so it goes on. Okay, so the frequency column tells us how many people in that group, or how many people are in that group. Okay, so frequency is the number of people in the particular group. So it is the number of people in this group. The other thing that I want to point out to you is when we are talking about class intervals, can you see how one value is not included and the other value is included? It always has to be like that. Okay, so we can't include both 10 and 20 and then in the next group include 20 and 30, because then if we did have a value like 20, into which group would it go? We can't put it into two different groups. Okay, so that's why you will always find that one value will be included and the other value will not be included. All right, so there are 11 people between the ages of 10 and 20 in the first group. Okay. In the second group, we said there were 14 people, and this is where the frequency starts to accumulate. So the word cumulative comes from the English word accumulate. Okay, which basically means that something starts to add up. Right, and that's exactly what we see happening here, matrix. Okay, what we do is that if we want to find the cumulative frequency for the second interval, which is the age between 20 and 30, that third row, we would add however many, what the frequency is in this row to the previous frequency. Okay, so you can see there our cumulative frequency, it was 0 in the first row, so 0 plus 11 gives us a cumulative frequency of 11 in the 10 to 20 age group. And then in the 20 to 30 age group, we would say 11 plus 14, which is 25. Okay, and so we keep adding the frequency of the next group to our cumulative frequency, and so it begins to add up. All right, why do we do this? We do this because cumulative frequency gives us a running total. All right, so it tells us at any given point how many people there are or less. So in other words, if we have a look at the fourth column, we can see that 11 people were 20 years of age or less. If we look at the next row, it says 25 people, our cumulative frequency is 25. 25 people were 30 years old or less. 42 people were 40 years old or less. Right, 55 people were 50 years old or less. This is the point of cumulative frequency, okay, is to give us this running total. So however many people are a particular age in our class interval or less than that. And we often get asked questions like that. And I'm going to show you an example of that this evening. All right. If we now want to plot this graph, okay, on a set of axes, all right, the points that we're going to plot are given to you in the last column. So where it says graph points, these are the points we plot. So here, the points we plot to get the ogive. Okay, now it's very important that your ogive has an x-intercept. Okay, so the ogive has to have an x-intercept. And we will always know the coordinates of the x-intercept from the class intervals. Okay, so we are not looking at this group over here where we have 0 frequency. The first group where we have a frequency is this group over here. It is always this number here on the left in our first class that is going to be our x-intercept. Remember, y is always equal to 0 at the x-intercept. So our x-intercept in this case will be 10 and 0. Okay, Lorraine, I know there was a problem with the link this evening, and that's why there are a lot of people that have kind of come in late. Let's just see what sort of numbers we're up to. Okay, so we're up to 39 people, so that's a little bit better. All right, so everybody, we are talking about cumulative frequency and the graph of the cumulative frequency called the ogive. Again, this is something that you should have done in grade 11. And I'm just going to spend some time this evening. Zonda, I don't know why. Yulinda, maybe you can help Zonda quickly. He says he can't
Yes,
see
I'll
this.
take care of that. Zanda, you may
Thank
log out
you.
and log in again, and then let's see. If that doesn't work, I'll send you a private message.
Yeah, if there's anybody else that's struggling to see the screen, just do as Yulinda says, log out and then log back in again. All right, and that should hopefully sort things out. Okay, so this is something that was done in grade 11. This is something that you should be familiar with, but don't worry if you're not. I'm going to go through it in detail with you this evening, and then hopefully you will be able to answer these questions in the upcoming trials exam. Okay, because they are not supposed to be difficult. They are supposed to be pretty easy. Okay, so your ogive has to have an x-intercept, as I was explaining. Your x-intercept is always going to be the number on the left, the smaller number, in your first row where your frequency starts. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be 10 and 0. Then the rest of the points you plot as follows. So this point over here is your x-coordinate. Against your cumulative frequency, this is your y coordinate. So you can see that's why they've got those points over there. Okay, so here it's going to have a x-intercept of 10 and 0, and then the first point that we plot would be 20 and 11. And so we continue to plot the upper bound of our class interval against cumulative frequency. Okay. Upper bound of our class interval against cumulative frequency. And so we keep going until we get all the way to the very end. All right. And what you should find, okay, it doesn't tell us here, but what you should find is that your frequency column and your cumulative frequency must add up to the same thing. All right. So here it must have been a group of 77 people because our frequency is 77 and our cumulative frequency adds up to 77. So the last point that we would plot would be 90 against 77. So this number over here is also important because that tells us how many people took part in this particular study. Okay. All right, Amahle, I'm gonna go through it all again. I'm gonna show you now on the ogive what we would do. The ogive is over here. This is what it looks like. Okay. All right. So just again, sorry, because I know that there were people that missed all of this. If you're hearing this again for a second time, my apologies. I'm just trying to help everybody that's joined late because of the link issue. Okay, so Amahle and others who came in a little bit late, cumulative frequency in the ogive was taught to you in grade 11. All right, so this is something that you should be familiar with. This particular example is about a group called Health Mania. They conducted a survey in Gauteng to find out which age group most frequently uses their health supplements because they want to market a new health supplement to this age group in Gauteng in order to sell the product. Okay, so the class interval represents the age, the age groups of the people in the survey. All right, so someone between 0 and 10 years of age. Okay, nobody between the ages of 0 and 10 uses any of these supplements. Then 10 to 20, there were 11 people between the age of 10 and 20 that use a Health Mania supplement. There are 14 people that use a health supplement between the age of 20 and 30. So frequency tells us the number of people in a particular age group. Okay, and what we're seeing here is that ages have been grouped together. So people between 0 and 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. But what you'll see is that on one of these ages, it's the greater than sign, and on the other one, it's greater than or equal to. Okay, so we can't have greater than or equal to 20 here and then greater than or equal to 20 here because then someone who is 20, into which group would they go? They can't go into both groups. Right, so that's why we ignore, we include one and we don't include one. All right, one is included and the other one is not included. The lower bound has not been included. The upper bound has been included. All right, so the people only go into one group. The next column is our cumulative frequency. So the word cumulative comes from the word to accumulate, which basically means that it adds up. So we add the previous frequency to the new frequency. So in other words, in this row over here, there were 0 people in the row before, so the cumulative frequency is 0 plus 11. In the row with the green arrow now, 20 to 30 years, all right, the cumulative frequency is now 25. We've added the 11 before to the 14. So these two numbers have been added together to give us a running total of 25. What does that mean? It means that there were 25 people who are 30 years of age or less who have participated in this study. Okay, and then we continue to add our cumulative frequency to the previous row's frequency in order to get a running total. All right, when it comes to plotting the graph or the ogive has to have an x-intercept. All right, so what we do, we're going to ignore this class over here because its frequency is 0. This is where we're starting, where the pink arrow is. So it's always the lower bound, the smaller number against 0 that is going to be our first point, our x-intercept. Okay, and we know that y would always be equal to 0 at the x-intercept. And then in order to draw the graph, we plot the upper bound against cumulative frequency. Can you see that here? Graph points, the upper bound against cumulative frequency. Again, the upper bound against cumulative frequency. All right, the upper bound against cumulative frequency. And so we plot these points, and what we are expecting to see is an S-shaped curve. Okay, so it generally ends up looking like that in shape. Okay, and it is supposed to be a curve, so you're not supposed to be drawing it with a ruler. So in the case of this particular study, here is the ogive. Okay, so I'm going to take it, and I'm going to move it up here so that you guys can see everything that I've been talking about. Okay, so first things first. Okay, cumulative frequency always goes on the y-axis. Okay, and your class interval, in this case age, is what's going on the x-axis. All right, so we're starting at 0 years of age, and we're going all the way up to 100 years of age. Can you see down here? I hope it's clear to all of you. I'll try and make this a little bit bigger. Maybe I should scooch over just a bit. No, Nhlanhla. All right. So it's always going to be, so wherever your frequency starts, right, it's always going to be the lower bound. Sometimes it's 0 and 0, and sometimes it isn't. It just depends on the data. Okay, so no, the first point in Nhlanhla is 10 and 0. You can see that here, 10 and 0. That's this point there. Okay, but it has to have an x-intercept. No, Nonjabulo, you don't. You don't have to label the intercepts like they have done here, but these are just labels to show you how the graph is created. So all of these points, these dots, are created, and then you would come along freehand and you would connect all of them in a smooth curve. All right. And then what you would be able to do is, if you wanted to read off how many people took part in the study, you would come along with your ruler. I'm going to use a pink line here, right? Hang on, let's make it bright pink so it sticks out. Like that. There you'd have your ruler. And let's just grab this. And you would put your ruler, sorry, mine's not straight. Let's try that again. Sorry, guys. Straight line. Okay, and let's just move it down. So over here, you would have a straight line, and you would read across. Okay, and then that would tell you how many people took part in the study. So can you see the 77 at the end? The 77 over here correlates with 77 over there, and then we would know how many people were in the study. Okay, Lebogang, it is marked strictly, so it will always get marked a mark on the x-intercept. Then they would give you an accuracy on the points that you plotted, and then there would be an accuracy on the shape. Okay, Nondomiso, what's your question?
Sorry, ma'am, it was a mistake.
Oh, it's okay, no worries. That's fine. Okay, so what they do after they get you to draw the cumulative frequency graph is they then get you to answer questions on it. Okay, so let's go and have a look at another example where we have to draw the graph and then they get us to answer questions about it. Okay, all right, so let's look at this example. The following table shows the marks obtained by 220 learners in a mathematics examination. Okay, so what we would need to do here is we would need to fill out our frequency column. So this 2 over here is going to go over there. Then there are 6 people that got between 11 and 20. Okay, then there are 11 people in the next group, 22 in the group after that, 39, then 59, then 45, then 20, then 11, and then there were 5 people. So this is how we would do our cumulative frequency. Okay, so nothing came before this 2, so the cumulative frequency at this point is 2. Over here, your cumulative frequency is your frequency plus the previous cumulative frequency. So it's 6 plus 2, which gives us 8. Okay, so what does that mean? Oh, Leanne, we did Euclidean geometry at the beginning of the year. You'll have to go back and go and watch the videos back in the first term. Okay, so what does it mean if there's a cumulative frequency of 8? What does that mean for us about the data? Can anybody tell me? What does it mean if there's a cumulative frequency of 8? Sure. But use the word less. This, or less. There are 8 students who, sure. Okay, but what does it mean? Okay, the 8 means, okay, it means there are 8 students or 8 learners who obtained what mark? 20% or less for the exam. That's what it means. Okay, so there are 8 learners who got 20% or less for the exam. Okay, now to get the next cumulative frequency, I've got to add the 8 and the 11 together. So this would give me 19. What does the 19 mean? It means there are 19 learners who obtained 30% or less for the exam. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so the 19 means there are 19 learners who obtained 30% or less for the maths exam. Okay. All right, because it is a running total. All right, so your cumulative frequency tells you how many or less. Okay, tells you how many obtained that particular mark or less for the particular exam. All right, so to get our next cumulative frequency, we would need to add 19 to 22. All right, so here we would end up with 41. Okay, and then to that we would need to add 39. So here we would get 80. And then to 80, we need to add 59. So over here, we would have 139. And then we need to add 45. And here we would get 184. So you can see each time I am adding cumulative frequency plus the new frequency of the group. Okay, now I'm going to add another 20. So 204. What does the 204 mean? It means that there are 204 learners that got 80% for the exam or less. Okay, so it tells me something about the data. Sorry. Sorry, beg your pardon. Grade 11s. Oh, grade 12s. Now we need to add 11 to that. That gives us 215 and another 5, and it adds up. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I just didn't want to bark in your ears. Someone's bringing me some water. Thank you. Thanks. Exactly, Mamelo. Okay, so you can see our cumulative frequency has also reached a total of 220. And they told us that in the beginning too, didn't they? They said to us that there were 220 learners that took place in this maths exam. If we add up our frequency column, okay, so we're going to add 2 and 6 and 11. We're adding up the frequency column. You should find, do it as well. You should find that it adds up to 220. Okay, so if you total this column, the frequency column here, you'll see that you get to 220 as well. It certainly is, Lindoa. Okay, good job. So now what they want us to do is they want us to draw the cumulative frequency or ogive for this data. Okay, so let's do this together, right? I don't have a graph for this particular one, but that doesn't matter. We're going to make our own, all right? So what goes on the x-axis matrix? What's going on the x-axis? Okay, the marks, good. Okay, so marks, this goes on the x-axis. Okay, cumulative frequency is what goes on the y-axis. All right, so we need to make sure that we can go up as high as 220. Okay, so let's draw a line here. Let's get black. And we'll draw ourselves okay. Alrighty. So we want to go from essentially 0 all the way to 220. Okay, so let's go up in 20s here. Okay, so we'll go 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, 200, 220, and then we'll just go to 240 like so. Right? Fortunately for you, the axes will be given to you. Okay, no, it must be to scale the circle. always, always, always. Okay, otherwise it's like when you draw a box and whisker plot, it has to be drawn over a scale. Okay, and your scale has to be accurate. Okay, then at the bottom, so let's go. So this would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Let's extend our line. 90, 100. Okay, so our marks are going here. And on the y-axis, we always have cumulative frequency. Okay, all right, so let's go and have a look at the points that we are going to plot. Okay, so the first point that we need to plot is our x-intercept. Can anybody tell me what the coordinates of the x-intercept in this case are going to be? What are the coordinates at the x-intercept for this data? Good, Nhlanhla, well done. It's going to be 1 and 0. So that's probably going to be, I don't know, somewhere over there. All right, well done, Nhlanhla, that's perfect. So Nhlanhla looked at this. That's the smallest one. Okay, the next point that we're going to plot would be what? What's the next point that we're going to plot? Ten and 2. Okay, so we're going to go here and we're going to plot that against cumulative frequency. So our next point would be 10 and 2. Good, Mamelo. And then after that, it would be 20 and 8. And then 30 and 19. Okay, so 40 and 41. 50 and 80. Okay, so always your end point of your group against your cumulative frequency. Okay, so the next one would be 60 and 139. Then it would be 70 and 184. And then it would be 80 and 204. And then it would be 90 and 215. And then our last point is going to be 100 and 220. No, Gantle, it depends on your data. So if you have a look at the previous example, all right, our x-intercept was at 10 and 0. Okay, we were talking about ages. All right, so 10 was the lower bound of the first class interval. Okay, in this data over here, the lower bound of our first class interval is 1. That's why the x-intercept is at 1 and 0. Okay, so it just depends on what you've been given. All right, so now it would be 10 and 2. So that's somewhere over there, I'd guess. 20 and 8, not much bigger. 30 and 19. So over there, it's starting off very slow. Then it jumps to 40 and 41. And then 50 and 80. All the way up there. And then 60 and 139. So that's like up there, very steep now. 70 and 184. That'll be somewhere over there. And then 80 and 204. And 90 and 215. And the last point would be 100 and 220. Okay, so can you see how it's making that S-shaped curve I was speaking about at the beginning? Okay, and what we should try and make sure that we do so that we read our information off accurately is make sure that when you draw your curve, it goes through all of these points. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, and this is one of those instances where I'm going to do my best. Oh, I missed this point over here, which is not great. I'm going to try and go through all these points as neatly. Ooh, whoopsie. And there we go, down. Okay. So that's what you do when you draw a cumulative frequency curve. Are there any questions before we go and have a look at the quartiles and the percentiles? Are there any questions you want to ask me on what we've done? Is there anything? You sure, Matrix? No questions? Is this all okay? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? You guys okay? Okay. All right. Okay. So, oh, good. All right. So this is meant to be easy. It's meant to be fairly straightforward. It's not supposed to be a difficult section. It's supposed to be one of the easier things where we can get all the marks. It's not meant to be too bad. Oh, good. All right. Lovely. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay. So now let's talk about the quartiles. So there is no need for us to learn formulae on how to calculate where the quartiles are. Okay, your lower quartile, okay, so Q1 will always be at 1/4 of whatever your cumulative frequency or frequency is. So that would be 220. Your median will always be halfway. And your upper quartile will always be 3/4 of the way in. Okay, so if they say to you, determine the lower quartile for the data, you take 220 and times it by 1/4, which is the same as dividing it by 4. Okay, you get 55, don't you? So now what you have to do is you have to find 55 over here. You're going to get your ruler. Okay, and again, I'm going to draw a pink one because it stands out nicely. So at 55, you're going to draw a ruler, a line over to your graph. Probably should be a little bit further up than that. Okay, let's see if I can move it up. Okay, and then you're going to come down. Okay, so you would then, whoopsie daisy, that's not the greatest either. You would then come down and you would read off. Okay, so we would say that the lower quartile, gosh, it looks somewhere between 40 and 50. It doesn't look, maybe about 44. Okay, so 44% would be your lower quartile. Because that's the total Lebogang, isn't it, in this case? Okay, so going back here. Okay, there were 220 learners in the study. Okay, so it would have to be 1/4 of 220. Okay, or a quarter of whatever the total was. So up here, it wouldn't be 220, all right? It would be a quarter of 77, or half of 77 for the median, or 3/4 of 77 for the upper quartile. Okay. Lesego, what do you mean why we were plotting between 40 and 50? What do you mean by that? We're reading off. So we found the position of our lower quartile. It's at 55, a cumulative frequency of 55, and that corresponds with a mark between 40 and 50, okay, about 44%. Okay, so you're reading off the graph. Okay, then again, you would find the position of your median halfway. So that would be at 110. Okay, so let's get blue. That's a nice bright color. And it, oh no, hang on, our graph was drawn in blue. So let's not do that. Let's get green. And we would find 110 here. And again, we would go across to our graph and down. Okay, to read off slightly over, to read off whatever that was. Okay, so this is the position of the median, and your median mark, it looks to be round about 55%. Okay, so there would be a little bit of leeway. Yes, it is necessary. If they, you see, Lesego, oh good, I'm glad. Okay, so yes, if they asked you for this, you must show it on the graph. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, well done. Yeah, you must show it. Must show where you have read off. And then 3/4 of 220. Its position would be at 165. I will, Mamelo, not a problem. I think that's what Lesego was also struggling with. So let's just do this one. So here at 165, I guess that would be roundabout over there somewhere. Again, we would go over and then down. Just move this. To there. Okay. So that looks, I don't know, about 62% or whatever. Okay, so what we are doing, Mamelo, Lesego, and anybody else, is when we are doing 1/4 of 220, we are finding the position of the lower quartile. This is the position of the lower quartile. Okay, so that's on the y-axis. All right, so if you want to know what the lower quartile is, the lower quartile is a mark. It's not cumulative frequency. Okay, so that's why you have to find the position of the lower quartile and then go across to your graph and then read down. Okay, to get what the value of your lower quartile is. No, you must calculate them separately, Amahle. Each one would be determined independently of the other. Okay, in how I've shown you over here. Okay. All right, so by finding the position and then reading down. And again, over here, the half 220, that gives you the position. Okay, it's where the median is located. All right, and same story over here. This is the position of the upper quartile. So this value here, 44%, that is the lower quartile. 55% is the median mark, and the upper quartile is 62%. All right, so if they did ask you for the interquartile range, you would then take the upper quartile and subtract the lower quartile, for example. Okay, if they did want to know what that was. I mean, they haven't asked that in this case, but if they did, that's what you would do. Okay, you don't have to do that. Okay, I know, Lindelwood, that's what people get taught at school, but it really is not necessary. Okay, you don't have to use that formula. Those formulae are for when you are working with really, really, really big numbers. Okay, it's not necessary to do that. It's at school. Okay, with this stuff. All right, it's just for the lower quartile. It's a quarter, the median, halfway. Yes. So Lebogang, yes, they will. Okay, and for the upper quartile, 3/4. All right, it will never ever be necessary for you to do it otherwise. Okay. Okay. So now, if they ask you for a percentile, all right, so where does the word percentile come from? Have you seen that word before? Percentile. Percentage, exactly. Okay, exactly. So it comes from a percentage. So if we want the 90th percentile, again, we need to locate its position on the y-axis and then read across. All right, so to get the 90th percentile, that would be 90% of 220. Okay, so 90% of 220 means that it would be located at 198. Okay, at 198, that would be your 90th percentile. So that's right up there, isn't it? Literally. We'll just move it down a fraction. There we go. And then I'm going to come down. Okay, so that would be my 90th percentile. Okay, so the 90th percentile would be somewhere between 70 and 80. It kind of looks like it would be about 74%. Okay. So it does mean percentage essentially, right? And Nhlanhla, why were you doing 215 divided by 220? Was that for the 90th percentile? So it would be 90% of 220. Okay, let's just answer some of the questions here. Mamelo, it's either they give you frequency or cumulative frequency, or they give you frequency map. Yes. So what they could do, if they're being kind, is they would give you the frequency, and then you would have to do the cumulative frequency. The other thing that they can do is something like this. All right, where they've filled in some of the frequency and some of the cumulative frequency, and you have to fill in the missing value. All right, so you would need to work out what goes in this block over here, for example. Okay, and what goes in this block over here, and what goes in that block there. They could do that. All right, so there is your cumulative frequency. That is your frequency column as well. All right, so remember they've got to add up to the same thing. Okay, so let's go back and go and have a look. Ma'am, how do you find the mean of the graph? Okay, so Menenhle, this is grouped data. So you could only find an estimated mean. Okay, so there's a method, a specific method for doing that when you've got group data. But that's not something that I was going to do this evening. Let's see, because I don't think we'll have time now. It's already 10 to 6. What I will try and do, because it does come up, you are supposed to know how to calculate an estimated mean for group data. That is something that I can show you, not in the next lesson, but in the lesson after that. Okay, and then just remind you how to do that, because it has come up in finals before. Okay, so I'll explain the percentile calculation again. It's not a difficult one, Lebogang. If they want you to determine the 90th percentile, you just have to find 90% of 220. Right, so 90% of 220 is 198. So you will find 198 here on your y-axis. And again, you're going to draw a line over and then down. Okay, so the 90th percentile for the data is 74%. That means only 10% of the people that did this exam got over 74%. That's what it means. Okay, so if you're sitting at the 90th percentile, only 10% of people would have got 74% or more for the exam. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes. Okay, good. All right, so if the 90th percentile is 74%, it means only 10% of the students got 74% or more for the exam. All right. Okay, good. And then the last question here, they want us to determine the 10th percentile. So again, that's not a difficult thing for us to do. The 10th percentile would be 10% of 220, which would be 22. So again, you'd find 22 over here. You'd go across, and then you would read down again. So maybe 31, 32%. Okay, so that means that 90% of people got 32% or more for the paper. Only 10% of the people doing this paper got 32% or less, would be another way of looking at it. Okay, that's what it means when you're working with a percentile. Okay, so 90% of students got 32% for the exam or more. Only 10% of the students got 32% or less.